Hey, everybody. Welcome to Salty Politics. I am here with my friend Chuck Rocha, who, dollar for dollar, is one of the best Democratic strategists in the land. And I am so happy to be here with you today, Chuck, on this happy, very hot Monday morning.
Are you in
Thanks
New
for.
York?
I am in New York, and it's god awful here. Where are you? Are you in DC or in Texas?
I'm in DC and it's hotter than Hades.
You know what? You're from Texas, so you really kind of are used to this. I am from New Jersey, so I am not as used to this. And
It is
it's
crazy hot. People like they were talking about like folks way up in the Northeast don't have air conditioning.
You know what? I know people up in Maine who do not have air conditioning and they're dying right now because I spoke to one of them yesterday and they were like on their last legs. But listen, I want to talk to you today about something that I've been apoplectic about, and I know you have too because you actually decided to do something about it last year, and at the end didn't pull the trigger. But that is the state of our beloved Democratic Party and what the hell is happening to it since even before the election. But before we get to that, a little thing called a war was launched over the weekend by Donald Trump. And the part that disturbs me, in addition to everything that he's doing, is that we haven't really heard much from our Democratic leadership. Ken Martin, the chair of the DNC, put out a statement. I couldn't care less what Ken Martin of the DNC or any DNC chair has to say about this because this isn't political. This is a matter of national security. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on that because we haven't heard much from either Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer, who should be speaking up since it is the role of Congress to actually take us to war. And what are your thoughts about that?
There's so many things, Julian. I really appreciate you saying that this ain't a political issue, that this is a national security issue. And uh, it's real people's lives. Like a lot of times, I'm as ignorant as the day is long about all the things of the Middle East. I know about the political implications because I've run political campaigns, but I'm one of the rare people who will admit what I just said. So as regular folks sit around and think about these bombs or these numbers, or there's 100,000 people dead here, or this many people injured there, like we just kind of roll past that as just numbers, and not that they're not real people and real families and real lives on either side of any conflict, right? And this morning I was sitting with it. I get up early in the morning every morning, Julie, and I go to the gym because I call it my quiet time so I can think and I kind of get read in with my podcast and what's going on in the world and listen to all these smart quote unquote people pontificate, if I use that word right, on what they think's going on. And I think sitting with why I was thinking about these people that voted for Donald Trump because, he was so adamant how stupid wars were and how stupid bombings are. And then he comes right in and does it. And I was thinking about it politically, but also thinking about it national security because my wife, who's over visiting with her mama right now, she just texted me and she was like, "Where are you connecting at on that fishing trip in December?" And I'm like, "I'm going through Qatar. Like I'm going from IED to Qatar to the Seychelles, and I'm going fishing with a bunch of old boys out at Seychelles." And she's like, "Absolutely not. You're not going through there. I can't let you be it. They're just put shelter in place in Qatar." And that's like little things. It don't matter. But
Yeah.
I can change my flight for a fishing trip. But this is real shit. And I appreciate you bringing it up because I think politically and national security wise, this should be on the top of everybody's mind. Gas prices fixing to go up.
Yeah, and not just gas prices. I mean, the Department of Homeland Security put out an advisory yesterday saying that the whole country basically should be aware that we are in a more perilous position now. The State Department put out an advisory yesterday saying if you're traveling, whether it's fishing in the Seychelles or going on vacation in Paris or going to Guam or going to China, doesn't matter. Worldwide advisory. As an American, you're in a more perilous position now. And you know, uh, I guess to your point, we don't know what we don't know, right? Trump is saying there were days away from weapons of mass destruction. We've heard that before. Tulsi Gabbard, his own DNI, said that we weren't back in March until her job was on the line, and now she kind of backpedaled and said we are. You had Chris Murphy, who's a Democratic senator from Connecticut, who's also on the Select Committee on Intelligence, who said he saw the same intelligence that the Republicans did, and Iran was nowhere close to developing nuclear weapons. And so you've got all of these different people saying different things. The rest of us have zero insight as to what's true and what's not because we don't have access to intelligence. And even if we did, I'm not sure I'd buy the intelligence at this point. But What I don't understand, and this is for us to talk about as Democrats, is where the hell is Chuck Schumer? Why have we heard nothing from him? We saw a brief statement from Hakeem Jeffries, um, basically saying, "Yeah, it's up to Congress to declare war." Okay, great, but there's more to it than that, which is that we're about to potentially get into our third war in the last 25 years, and it seems like the Republicans are full force going on message, rallying behind the flag, rallying behind the president, and the Democrats are not. I don't know if they're going to be the opposition on this, but they're nowhere, whether they're in support or in opposition as a unified party, and that's the kind of leadership, I guess, that's been missing on every issue. I feel since this election, at a time when our country is really kind of up shit's creek on a number of levels.
God, I remember us talking about this a little bit in the green room when we met and we were talking in New York, and it really hasn't changed much, and that was months ago. And I think that the protest, the No Kings protest, were an example of the frustration that people feel. Estimated 5 million people took to the streets to just say, "We don't need a king, we need a president." Because there is this yearning, and and folks who are listening to this Substack know me. Chuck Rocha, the Mexican redneck, never went to college, yada yada. And this accent and this hat is not made up. Is I'm a very simple man, and I've been a simple man for a long time, and it's made me a very good political consultant. So I'm very close to people because I was those people. I have a lot more privilege now. I get to live in Washington D.C. and get to go fishing in the Seychelles. To me, that means I am rich if I can go on a fishing trip. But regular folks are just trying to figure it out, and they are desperately aggravated about what they're seeing. To your point, Julie, is it about the war? That's just another example of where are the Democrats. Where you need to be standing up, and there's two things you have to do in an election to win. And I'm not explaining this to Julie because she knows this, but this is for everybody. Remember, there's only two things you have to do. Two things. You have to disqualify the person who's in office to beat them. You have to say why that you have to fire them. I say give the case, make the case to fire the person in charge if you want to replace them. Then, and this is the part we suck at, Julie, is then say, and then this is my vision of what I'm different from them. And this is what I'm going to do, right? Whatever that thing is, you have to contrast so people are go, oh, that sounds good. And oh, that sounds bad. Seems like Donald Trump is fixing to put us into World War III, and that these people want to stand over here maybe against that and are for working class people and for whatever those things are. And we could have a TED talk, and I know Julie, you could too, about what we should be standing for. But right now, I don't see any of that.
None of it, and I'm having complete deja vu. You and I are old, so we've been around a long time. I was in the Senate. I was working in Washington in the Senate on 9/11, and the same exact thing that you see now is what you saw then. This immediate drumbeat to, well, we got to go after the people responsible. Okay, the people responsible were in Afghanistan. Fine. But then we pivoted to, then we have to go after Saddam Hussein because he's got weapons of mass destruction. This time, we've skipped the whole 9/11 part of it. And we just attacked Iran. Why? Unclear. Unclear. If you read the New York Times TikTok on it, it's because the president was watching Fox News and everybody on Fox was saying he's got to do it. And so he did it. And as somebody who worked at Fox News very shortly after we declared war in Iraq, I got there in 2004. I can tell you it's the same nonsense that was going on back then. This drumbeat to take us to war, to take us to war. Rupert Murdoch loves this shit. They love rallying around the flag with military action because none of them actually fight, right? Sean Hannity's not sending his kids off to war. Rupert Murdoch's not sending his kids off to war. But the part that I just don't understand is everything that you and I are talking about right now is something that people in much more influential positions than we are, with much bigger megaphones at their disposal than we have, should be talking about. And yet, exactly what you said about the part where you have to disqualify your opponent, that's not happening because they're just silent. They're not disqualifying him on it. They're just not saying anything at all. And then the part that we stand for, I have no idea where our leadership is on this. I mean, I truly, can somebody tell me where Chuck Schumer is on this strike? Because I have no clue.
I think it's important to mention that the Republicans are divided on this as well. That's why it's such a great opportunity. And I don't want
Yep.
to use opportunity like war as an opportunity because I think, again, it's real people's lives. But you have Republicans tearing at each other while the majority of Democrats are saying right now, I've seen congressmen out there. I've seen statements that everybody has put out that says we're against what's going on, and it's going to lead to things that are really bad for this country. While the Republicans are tearing each other apart, but because we're not in power, and it's in the way that this town, and when I say this town for all of you listening, Washington D.C., it's taken me a long time to figure it out. Is like everything is run through a machine of like this is the way it's supposed to work. That's why Donald Trump is so disruptive, and a lot of times Democrats who ain't never really been in a fist fight don't know how to deal with somebody like him who operates outside of the machinery of the way you're supposed to, quote unquote, do whatever you're doing. He tweets too much about it. He puts national security out there. I get all of that. And a lot of people with master's degrees, it just makes their head explode because they're like, oh my God, how could he do that? I'm like, because he is crazy. And he's about halfway not even knowing what he's doing. And so their party is divided, which is a void where Democrats could step in and be like, look, we need to make sure this, and this thing happens, and then make sure that we are for this and that this is bad, right? And then this can be good for you, and then give them those reasons. National security, overseas foreign relations stuff, it ain't my ballywick. I don't know all the integral details like you have or other folks have, but politics and campaign is where I've lived for 37 years. And talking to people about trying to get them to vote for somebody that I think is who's best got their best what would you say has their best intentions at heart, wants to help them make more money, pay less taxes, get cheaper, whatever the thing is to make regular folks have a chance to live the American dream that I got to live. That's been my goal from day one, and I just don't see us talking about that a lot.
We're not. And we're not talking about that in the context of this war or whatever this is right now, this military excursion that we just went through. But even backing up, you had contemplated, you talked about this publicly, running for chair of the DNC after this election. I texted you immediately when I heard that. I said, sign me up if you want to do this, because you actually get how normal folks think, not just here in New York where I'm sitting or in DC where you're sitting, but around the country. And not just that, but you also get how voters of color think in ways that I think most consultants don't. Because the truth of the matter is, we are bleeding Latino voters right now. We are bleeding African American men. I mean, it's getting late in the day to get them back, but we could, I guess, if we gave them a vision of what we stood for. And yet, I'm seeing either crickets from our congressional leadership or horrible infighting from the DNC right now. And at which point do we just uh, blow the whole thing up and start from scratch? I don't even know what to say. I am so frustrated, Chuck, that I don't even know where to turn on this,
Well,
because it's gotten to the point where we're not giving people a reason to even take a look at us. Forget voting for us. At a time when the opportunity is huge, we've got a crazy guy in the White House who millions of people turned out against last weekend or 2 weekends ago, and yet where are we seizing that opportunity? I don't
we
know.
have to separate some of this stuff. And Julie, I didn't mean to try to interrupt you, but I get worked up like you do, and I want to. You're my friend, and I want to set you at ease. Is that things are bad, but they're not horrible. And I don't mean just because he's in office. People that are watching this who are political animals like me and you need to separate the DNC from the congressional and the Senate races.
Right.
The DNC and Chuck Schumer, you know that, I know that. But people at home are like, we need the DNC to come over here and win this congressional race. That's not what the DNC does.
DNC doesn't do that.
Right. But the DNC does do some important things. And right now, without a leader of the party, they're seen as the leader in Ken Martin or whoever's over there, even though they're not really the leader. Schumer and Jeffries actually are the ones that opposition to a lot of things that could be happening. I digress. Let me tell you about the DNC. Then I want to talk about the House for just a second. Is the DNC could be doing one thing that's really important, which is centering the party back to where the party began when me and Julie joined the party. Because the Democrats of the days when me and Julie, I'll speak for myself and not her in this instance, was because it was the party of workers. It was the working class party. From the beginning of time when I had hair and was skinny and these hairs on my face were dark black and not white, we were the party of regular folks and they were the party of the country club rich people and the elites. That's why I joined the party. I'm not an elite by no sense of the imagination. And I thought, well, I want to be with the folks that are with the workers. Anybody that knows my story know I came up in the union movement. I actually worked in a factory for most of my life. My factory got shipped overseas. I got involved with the union by happenstance. So all of that was like not the regular trajectory to being a political consultant. So the DNC's job, and the reason I was thinking about it is I wanted to bring the party back to the roots and tell voters honestly, look, we messed up. Democrats have gotten off on all these different tangents that are important as well, but we want to be centered around working families and what those issues are. It could be abortion. It could be health care. It could be minimum wage. It could be any of these things, as long as it helps your family every single day. That should be the only thing we care about. And everything else should be a bonus. And then the last part of that is rebuilding state parties. This is something that the DNC does. The House don't do it. The Senate don't do it. The DNC has two jobs. One is to help elect a Democratic president at the presidential level and work with each state party and their state party executive committee to do whatever they're doing. In states, it should be building county parties, parties where there's lots of people living, to start this thing that's not just policy 3 months before every election, but an ongoing activism that's rooted in the community. We have forgotten about that and let Republicans even steal our mantra, steal this thing around like not vibes, but just like being cool and being the party of like hanging out and being the party of it's okay. Of like all of the regular shit, the reason I joined it, I am so imperfect, not only as a man, but as a human. But the Democratic Party I joined honored that and welcomed me in and said, just because you're a Mexican redneck and you talk funny, you're still welcome here. And we're going to talk about your issues. We've gotten away from that and became a little bit too preachy and too crazy about the way that we talk about things.
No question about it. And the other thing the Republicans did so well, and they started this even before Roe v. Wade, but really amped it up in the 70s and 80s, is they invested in organizations like GOPAC, where they built up these state parties, as you said, and they became incubators not just for their state policies. Like, you want to know why they control Congress right now? Because they control, for example, the North Carolina legislature. And they control the North Carolina legislature because they have organizations invested in controlling state legislatures. So they have places like GOPAC. They have the Federalist Society.
And then they redistricted all where this
And they
really
redistricted.
gerrymandered.
Yeah, of course. We, meanwhile, fall in love with either Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, or whoever we fall in love with, and then that guy goes away, and we're left with nothing. Whereas they, look, they're obsessed with Trump, and I get it, it's a cult. But if Trump dropped dead tomorrow, the underlying fundamentals would still be really strong for the Republicans, both at the legislative level and also at at the judicial level, because the Federalist Society has done an incredible job. I mean, my hat's off to them about it in terms of flipping state houses and state courthouses. And so, all of that is the reason why they've built up and they've built up and they've built up and they've built up until they now control every branch of government, including the Supreme Court. And where is the DNC to do that? As you said, where is the DNC to invest in state parties in all 50 states? Because I'll use Florida as an example. Florida should never have been lost to Democrats, but it was because we didn't invest in the state party there for generations.
And when you did in the state party, and this is the biggest flaw with every state party out there, and I mean no disrespect if this is you, but if it's you, then you need to change, is that uh, Democratic consulting and Democratic power structures are one of the last bastions of the good old boy or good old girl system where you fail up. And what happens is there's money that starts moving into the state party apparatus. And then you have a group of consultants that are normally tied to some relation that somebody has within that state party, and they keep those contracts forever. And it don't really adhere to trying to get the best and the newest voices in, whether you're an outsider or not an outsider. Like, this is where the party should be doing. If I had become the DNC chair, they would have been this investment that I would have done not only in the battleground states, and you should have the Michigans and Pennsylvania should have the biggest and the best robust parties, but there are lots of concentrations of all of that money and training in just around major metropolitan areas like a Pittsburgh, a Philly, or a Detroit. There's a lot of mid-sized cities across America that has no infrastructure for a state Democratic Party. And the Republicans, to your point, Julie, they've done a lot of investment in it because that's where their voters were there in rural America. And then they've tried to grow into the cities through Black men or Latinos. We can talk about that. But these mid-sized cities that weren't the sexiest places to work in. And if you're from Texas or around Texas, I know there's a lot of folks that follow me on my Substack from Texas. There are big cities in Texas like Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. And guess what? And Austin. They're bastions of good Democratic policy and lots of Democratic leaders there. There's lots of folks who are Democrats. But there are 20 cities in that state that have more than 100,000 people, Julie, that don't really have a state party. That's where we start. If you want to talk about building infrastructure, I'd start there. There'd be candidate training, professional training for folks to get involved, and there'd be a year-round organizing model. Us in the community fighting back when they're trying to cut Medicaid, for example, or I was out this morning with a video because they want to sell 300 million acres of public land in this bill. It drives me. I'm a very avid hunter and fisherman, and when you start talking about public lands, it really gets my goat. No, on top of everything else that's just crazy going on, selling Yellowstone sounds like a bad idea. So I've been off on a tangent on public lands. But guess what? A lot of Republicans are pissed about public lands as well, and them thinking about selling. We should be looking at things that bring us together instead of things that
Yeah.
tear us apart.
And I guess as we are talking about how we're starting to lose and hemorrhage constituencies that I frankly think the Democratic Party's taken for granted for a really, really, really long time. Every single time, I don't do too many elections anymore, but every time I would do a statewide race, we would promise African American voters, specifically, the moon. I mean, whatever you want, just come out and vote for us. And then, of course, the minute they would deliver their votes, bye bye. We're not going to do that because we're going to focus on these mythical swing voters who are important, but not necessarily as dispositive as making sure that your base stays intact. And so, after a while, no surprise, these voters said, we're tired of being taken for granted. And we're going to, when Trump said, what do you have to lose? I guess a lot of them believed him. I think that was foolish, but a lot of them believed them because the opportunity was ripe to believe them because the Democrats had promised them the moon and really did not deliver. I mean, the backbone of this party since Lyndon Johnson has been black women. And what do black women get? What do they get except a token? Okay, you get to be a vice presidential candidate or you get to be a Supreme Court justice. But what about on a daily basis? What do they get for actually showing up each and every time? And that's why you're starting to lose black men specifically. And I think in focus groups that I've seen with Latino voters, they're just brass tacks. They just want shit done. They don't want to deal with your nonsense about wokeness or anything else. They just want their streets paved and their and their crime down and their and money for small businesses, and they just want stuff done. And that, Republicans saw an opportunity there and Democrats slept on it. I don't know what your views on it is, but that's everything that I've seen in every research, both qualitative and quantitative research that I've seen. That's exactly what I saw happening.
Have I still got you?
Yep, I'm still here.
Good, because I lost my phone fell over.
That's all right.
Anyway, if you'd seen how I had it duct taped up, you'd have laughed. So let me put a little meat on that bone, as they would say in East Texas. You were exactly right, but it's even more complex than that. And this is what I do for a living, so let me talk about it. The loss or the movement of black men and Latino men are a certain group of them. If they're over 50, they're still staunchly Democrats like they've always been. They'll ride out the rough patches and they'll go. What's wrong? What's happening is these younger men of color and younger voters in general, but especially young Latino men and young black men, and for all young men, to be honest, like this ain't some supernatural thing. And you've seen these Latino men and Latino voters, folks are about 10 years younger than the average voter. So we're just younger by all demographic standards. So you have to root your conversation when you talk about young voters, you're talking about Latino voters because Latino voters average age is 29 when a white voter's average voter age is like 41, same with African Americans. So they're just different demographically. Then they come from all parts of the country. They speak many different languages. Dominicans and Puerto Ricans are different than Latinos. Centering that conversation of who is the Latino vote, Julie, 64%, 65% of all Latinos in America are Mexican American. Folks should know that. When we talk about Cubans and Dominicans, they're all less than 10%. Mexicans are the king. They're the biggest. They're everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But in little pockets of the country, Eastern Pennsylvania, all the Latinos there, Puerto Rican, Dominican,
Yep.
New York, as you know well, Dominican, Puerto Rican, Venezuelan, then don't get me started on Florida. So it's very different. And so when you go to what Julie's saying, of many, many cycles where your whole goal is to spend as much money as you can to talk to quote unquote marginal white suburban voters because the pollster has told you that's where the movement are. That's where these mythic Obama, Trump, Obama, Bush voters are. And that we got to go persuade them because they vote in every election. They own a house, they own a car, and they move back and forth and they always vote. This is a key to y'all. They call them prime voters because they always show up. So we spend a lot of time doing that instead of talking to base voters, black, Latinos, some young folks, about getting more of them into the system, registering and being and becoming as good a voter as their mother or their father or their grandparents. And because those voters were younger coming of age, they fell out of the prime voter universe for us. So we never really had a conversation. That's why Julie's point is so important when they were like, what have you done for me? They haven't even heard from the party. And it's not that the party doesn't like them or takes them for granted. That was Julie's words. It's even worse than that because we don't try because they're not in the algorithm of what the data model says. Now, I'm getting under the hood of the car, but we spend more and more money every cycle, y'all, talking to less and less people. This is part of the problem of what's wrong with the party as a whole. While Republicans, and they don't do this because they're brilliant, they just do it because they have a lot of money. They just shotgun that shit out there on Facebook ads and everything else, hoping they can either keep enough black and brown people to stay at home or get folks invited in because of some kind of grievance politics. That at its core is what's happening overall across the country, Julie.
So, what's the solution? Because these are voters we can get back. I mean, it's on the cusp, right? We
Yeah.
can get them back.
They're not going
And
that way because they want to be Republicans. They're just aggravated with the Democrats. I
yeah,
promise you.
so uh, look, you're going to hear consistently from consultants, of which you and I are two, but you and I don't subscribe to this, that there's only a limited amount of time and there's only a certain amount of money. And we've got to go, as you said, after these mythical swing voters. And we got to bring back the white rural voter. And we've got to, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, I still believe demography is destiny. And I still believe that the fastest growing demographic in this country is not that mythical rural voter, it's Latinos and just voters of color more generally. And yet, I can't tell if Democrats just think and continue to take them for granted or what they think. It just makes no sense to me whatsoever as to why we continue to make these mistakes over and over. There's two races happening right now in one in New Jersey, one in Virginia, statewide this year. And I can't speak to Virginia, but I've done a lot of work in New Jersey over the last several years. And I can tell you, New Jersey is Trump made New Jersey purple last year. New Jersey, blue Jersey went purple last year. Trump only lost by 5 points on the backs of Latino voters. He won places like Passaic County, New Jersey, because of Latino voters. He won the Latino portions of Hudson County, New Jersey, which has the largest collection of Cuban voters outside Florida. And I don't see the state party changing course. I don't see anybody waking up to that reality, at least in New Jersey, which I'm next door to here in New York. I don't know what's happening in Virginia. You probably might have a better sense of that than I do because you're down there. But I don't see these lessons learned either at the DNC level, which actually can invest in these state parties to steer them in the right direction, or at the state party level, at least in places that matter this year. And this year is going to be important. It's a predicate for next year, obviously, but it's also important as the first marker of a reflection of how people feel about Trump. I mean, if Trump wins New Jersey, he's not going to win. Republicans aren't going to win Virginia, but they're very much in a position to win New Jersey this year. If Trump wins New Jersey or his candidate wins New Jersey, I mean, what a shot in the arm to the whole MAGA movement.
You couldn't be more right. And I'm glad you brought this up. And if your initial question was, what do we do to fix it? And one of the things we do is, and you're right about Passaic. I wish I could push back on all of that. And I've worked with Nellie Poe. I worked with Ross Baraka in the primary where he carried Latinos because he showed up and he started
Yeah.
talking and we were advertising to Latinos and I was one of his consultants. And one of the most underfunded campaigns got second place. Like there's a reason why those things happen and not in a silo. Is the one thing that hasn't happened, Julie, and I don't think me and you've even had this conversation, is that there's not very many working class, black, brown, women, men, it don't matter your color, really involved in any of these apparatuses. And the reason we lose these voters is it's not because of the brilliance of Republicans, to Julie's point. It's kind of like they're just really frustrated with Democrats. But if we don't show up, there hasn't been Democrats showing up and telling a poor Latino kid in Passaic what he's going to do to make his life better. But Donald Trump says, I'm going to not tax your tips. I'm not going to tax your overtime. And before he started dropping bombs on Iran, he said he was against wars. Well, that's the reason I joined the Democratic Party. We have talked about this, and I say this all the time. It makes Democrats mad. But I joined the party in 1989 because they were shipping my job overseas. I worked in a tire factory in East Texas when my daddy and my uncles worked there. I was tired of seeing my tax dollars spent overseas and all my overtime money went away in taxes. And then when those taxes were paid, they gave it to some other place and not and then I wanted to drain the swamp more or less because I thought folks thought they were better than me because they had a college degree or had some fancy whatever. It was just my grievance as a 20-year-old kid. Well, that's changed a lot as I got 50, but that's why I joined the party. That's the point of it. That sounds like Donald Trump today, and it really pisses me off. If you want to change what's happening, you need to have more working class Latinos, Black folks, working class women involved in these campaigns. The same group of consultants have run the same operation for a long time for these state parties and at the national level. In the last election cycle alone, in the top 50 races, there was not a single Latino or Black manager outside of the presidency, of course. Like you said, there's always, they put that out front because there's a lot of, but there was no congressional race managed by a Black woman. You just said Black women are the backbone of this party. Not a single Black woman managed a single congressional or Senate race in the last election. And not a single Black woman who owns a media firm worked on a single one of those. I'm saying media firms because media firms run these campaigns, was a manager or a media firm. There wasn't a majority minority owned media firm for any of the top 50 races. Now that is crazy for that to come out of my mouth, but I am not making that up. So when you think about, well, why don't they show up and why don't they do this and why don't they do that? Well, Julie, the way we can change it is to have some of us be in charge of making those decisions of actually showing up. We're still reliant on the same group of consultants who broke it to fix it. If there's a doctor in your neighborhood and he keeps killing all of his patients when he operates on them, are you going to run to him to get your operation done? No, you need to change things up or you're going to die.
Well, you talk about Ras Baraka, and for people who don't know, Ras Baraka is the mayor of Newark. He was, among many other things, the man who was initially arrested at Delaney Hall about a month and a half ago, when he and three members of Congress were visiting Delaney Hall, which is a big ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey. And Ras Baraka, I know his consultants. I didn't know that you were one of them, but I'm glad to hear that you were. His lead consultants were men of color who have, it's not that they haven't been involved in the Democratic Party in New Jersey, they have been, but they haven't really had a seat at the table the way that they should have in the past. And what he did was he beat much, 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 much better funded candidates
A lot more
and came in
funded.
second. I mean, some of these were funded to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. He never even got matching funds. I mean, he was not well funded at all. Nobody gave him a shot. And he came in second. It was a distant second, but nevertheless, he came in second. And the reason he came in second and just developed a huge voice that was never given before is precisely because of what you said. Because there were plenty of people, and not just Black people from Newark, New Jersey, but people all over the state, including white women, who said, you know what? It's time to give somebody like this, who has never had a seat at the table, a shot. Because it can't get worse. Because it's totally a closed-off system. And that's the case in D.C. with the DNC. That is the case on Kamala's campaign, where the same people ran the same stuff over and over again. It's why Hillary lost. And it's a question of, at which point are we going to stop gatekeeping and allowing other people in? And I will give you a great example. There is a primary tomorrow in New York City, as I sit here right
Oh,
now.
yeah,
I
that's
am
right.
I am very torn about how to vote tomorrow. I mean, I literally don't sleep at night wondering how I'm going to rank. It's ranked choice voting, how I'm going to rank some of these candidates. But the reason that you have a 33-year-old Democratic socialist named Zora Mamdani, who is surging against Andrew Cuomo, is not because I think people love his messaging, because I don't think they do. It is because they want to stick it to the same establishment that has been gatekeeping for the last 30, 40, 50 years. And when you have somebody like Bill Clinton, who I think was a fantastic president, coming out and endorsing Andrew Cuomo, it just gives the other side more impetus to say, we're tired of this crew. We want change. And if that change looks like Ras Baraka, who I don't know how many people knew about his policy views, or Mamdani, I don't know how many people know about his policy views, but it's just that we want change and we're frustrated because we feel like we haven't been getting it. And I'm frustrated too. I mean, I'm tremendously frustrated because you see what's happening in Washington right now. And the same people who've been in charge. I mean, God bless Chuck Schumer. He's been my senator for decades. But where are you, Mr. Leader? Where is everybody? I
Well,
mean,
what you're describing is also, I think it's just important to mention, is that's how Donald Trump actually got elected.
no
Is
question.
there were people that they did not love Donald Trump, but they loved that he spoke to their grievance, and they thought he was just. People are always like, Chuck, why did so many new people just show up who had never voted before? Because they saw him as literally when he stood in front of them and said, "I'll be your retribution." And then they saw Joe Biden as old and weak. If the same folks who always vote in all the elections vote in the last election, we win. They lose. But he brought a lot of new people up, and then a lot of people that were Democrats, not a lot, but enough in the right places, stayed home because they were Julie. They were conflicted. They were like, man, I am not voting for this crazy sexist, sexual offender, felon, all the things that he is. But Joe Biden is tepid and he's these things or he's that thing, like whatever your thing was. And I'm not sitting here I don't want to debate that with any of y'all. You have your right to your opinion and it's your vote. I honor that as a professional in this field. If I can't talk you into voting for my guy, it's my fault. uh, Terrence Woodbury, a black poster. Now you should know there's like two of them, but he said, "Why do you want?" When they were people like give him shit about black men, and we're doing a panel at Netroots Nation, Julie, at the convention next month about are black men and Latino men the new swing voter? Kind of it's a kind of a play on the soccer mom bullshit, and
Right. Well,
so
they are, aren't they?
yeah, they are, and they would commentators, black commentators would say to him, "Well, what are we going to do about these black men? And what are we going to do? What are you going to do? You're a black man. Can't you fix this problem?" And he looked at him. I'll never forget this. He goes, "Why are we blaming black men for not buying a product that we're selling?" He's like, "If folks don't like Coca-Cola, make a better fucking Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Don't blame the fucking consumer if they don't like Coca-Cola. You better make something that they like." And I use
Well,
that shit all the time, Julie. Feel
it's
free to use
true.
it.
It's true because when Barack Obama stood there and wagged his finger and lectured black men for not voting for Kamala because you know you're misogynist and you know your mama's going to be embarrassed. Like,
They don't like that shit.
who wants to be lectured? Who
I'm
wants to
gonna
be lectured?
When I was I was with my son this weekend. I got to see him and my beautiful grandboys. My son is a 35-year-old steam fitter in Pittsburgh. Like, how much more blue collar? Of course, Chuck Rocha's son is a steam fitter, a
Right.
union steam fitter in Pittsburgh, of all places. So he came over. I was up doing a thing up in Harrisburg. So he's only a few hours. He brought the boys over and we got to spend the night together. And they swam at the Hampton pool because they don't have no pool. But anyway, it's a good thing. And we get to hang out and it's cheap and it's fun. And then, I remember being his age, and I remember it wasn't that long ago. I was a teenage father when I got custody of my boy. He was only 3 months old. I've raised him his whole life as a single father, and he's 35 now. And I remember there's a certain thing about young men in their 20s when testosterone is just raging through their body. And I say that not to say anything derogatory to anybody. You can all kiss my ass. It's just something that happens to all boys. And you don't like anybody to tell you what you can't do. I am 56 now. And my wife will tell you right now, I do not like to be told what not to do. And sometimes I'll do the other thing just in spite of. Now, you do less of that as you get older because you realize it ain't very productive, as they would say. But this is to Julie's point of like going and preaching at these folks ain't going to be how you get them back. But showing up and saying, "Hey, man, look, this is crazy. We've lost our way. We're going to get this party back to what it should be. I realize you voted for Donald Trump, and that's cool. That's fine. But we want you back over here because, as you can see, Donald Trump, the only family he cares about is his family. We need you back over here where we care about all the families, especially yours." That ain't
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. And especially people who are not exactly getting a piece of the pie under Donald Trump, right? I mean, there's a great argument to be made, and I guess my frustration, Chuck, is who the hell's making that argument? Like, who's making it? You and I can sit here in Substack, and I'm glad that we are, and there are other people on Substack and other people in social media making this argument. But who's actually making this argument so that it's heard by the right people every day? Because
The bet.
I don't hear it. And God bless Hakeem Jeffries, and I'm glad that he's an African American man in a position of influence. But I don't see him speaking to African American men in ways. Maybe he is. I mean, I'm not an African American man, so I wouldn't be hearing it. But I don't see that message.
I think that I think he's doing a good job. I don't know if he's it's a hard job right now, but he is out there. Here's where people say he's out there. He's not out there. He's doing a good job. He's not. You can't bullshit me. No peso, no say so. So if you're not spending money to talk to folks, then I know you don't really care.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between the party committees and what they're doing in the House and what's happening on the ground. And one of the best, I love to give them props because everybody's so down right now. There are folks that are doing good work. And the good work is happening at places like House Majority PAC, which Nancy Pelosi used to run, and
Yep.
now Mr. Jeffries runs. Nobody talks about this, but we flipped 4 congressional seats from R to D last cycle in Latino heavy areas. When folks were talking about the Latino vote moving away, I know because I was on these races as a consultant with other consultants. This is the difference: is unlike those campaigns I described earlier, the House Majority PAC and some of these large PACs, they include women, people of color, consulting firms at the table who have a say so in all of these races. And that's why those races look a little different. They come off a little different. They spend more money on Spanish and English conversations. And it's really been the bedrock of us going to win back the House. Now, at the campaign level, there's nothing happening at the campaign level. It's the same. This is the biggest problem is the campaigns. There's nothing happening there. But there are groups of folks and PACs that are trying to do, and they're giving us so much red meat. It's going to be so good for Democrats, maybe so bad for democracy and people who care about food stamps and need something to eat. Like, I don't mean a lot of that because it's real people's lives. But when you cut people off of Medicaid, here's a little behind the curtains for you folks. All the ads over the summer are going to be a competing competition. And I've already seen the ads being made. One is going to be Democrats and us and me making ads saying that the Republicans just kicked 13 million people off of their insurance or Medicaid. And these are very important issues. And we're going to say that this is defining for them of who they are and who they're with. Republicans, get this, I just found this out over the weekend, are making ads right now to put up right after the big beautiful bill is passed saying, we just gave you a new child tax credit. We just passed no tax on tips, and we just passed not to tax your overtime. So those 2 arguments are going to be what each side are using to try to win an election. It'll be really interesting to see which one of those resonates the best or who does the best job at it. Democrats haven't been the greatest messengers over the last few cycles, but I'm just saying that's where the battlefield is right now. It's going to be their taxes cuts against the Medicare cuts.
Okay, but ultimately, the very fact that they even have an argument to be making on behalf of working people and haven't been disqualified already
Great
in
point.
earned media
Great point.
before we start spending the pesos, as you said, is a problem.
It really
Is a
is.
problem.
It's the problem, Julie. That's why
Yep.
I'm so happy you said that, because I think that's the thing is that folks want to fix what's wrong with the Democratic Party tomorrow, especially rich donors. They want this thing fixed right now. Well, this has been, and Judy's going to laugh, we've been breaking this party for a long time, and we're not going to fix it overnight. But we have a path now to Julie's point, of a crazy man in the White House to have a path back to fix it, to start fixing it. Don't expect it to all get back to the way it was, that was like it was 20 years ago tomorrow. It's going to be a slow grade back, but there's a way back. And the next off year election is a great way to start because we're going to have a good off year. There's no doubt in my mind it's going to be good, but could it be astronomical? It could be, but leave it to Democrats to mess up something that could be great because we do good at that. But this is a good path back. But tell yourself, is we're not going to get all the way back till we rebuild our credibility with working families, that they trust us again to be their vindication for workers, not to go out and start wars, but to reinvest in families, make daycare cheaper, to try to show up where folks are and their hardships every day, saying the government should be here to help you a little bit with this thing that you're having to struggle through all the time. Why does insurance have to be this much? Why do those pills have to cost this much? Can the government do a little something there to help a brother out or a sister? That's all they want. It ain't complicated.
Well, let me ask you this, because you raised a good point that we've been breaking this party a long time, and I agree. And I think everybody has a view of when we went off the tracks. When do you think that things went off the tracks from a messaging perspective for the Democrats?
When you made a point a while ago that we fall in love with somebody like Barack Obama and he won re-election. But what we don't talk about, Julie, is I think this is the start of it, because we thought he was our savior of all saviors. We got fat. We got lazy. We watched a lot of consultants fail up the ladder. But underneath that, you probably know this, but your listeners should know this. While Barack Obama was in office for 8 years, we lost 1,000 Democratic House seats for Democrats. We lost them. We flipped them from that used to be Democratic seats for y'all elementary folks like I am over to Republicans. We lost 1,000 state House and state Senate seats because there was no investment in the state parties. There was no investment at the local level. We were all super proud that we had a black president, including Chuck Rocha. My son wrote a song about it. He was so moved that he was 19. Like, we love that, but we forgot to do the work. We forgot to do, and the Republicans like, shit, we're gonna have to go create the Libre Initiative with the Koch brothers, where we have these Latino things. The Libre Initiative has been working for 20 years or 12, 15 years. That's why this Latino thing didn't just happen. They were in the Valley and they were in Miami and they were in places working when there wasn't an election, giving out turkeys at Thanksgiving, helping folks get driver's license when they needed some assistance. While there's no Democratic Party infrastructure there. So I think that was the beginning of it. So it was softening us up. Then we still were getting 60, 70% of the Latino vote, especially with the Clintons, because they remembered Bill Clinton and they loved them. But then you bring out somebody like Donald Trump. That's when it really starts escalating, because he sounds like a Democrat. He sounds like Bernie Sanders or a Dick Gephardt or an old school Democrat that I loved growing up, because they were like, we got these trade deals. We need to have more manufacturing here. Can't we? We may not can make phones here, but can't we make T-shirts and tennis shoes here again, like, or furniture, or the things that were in every little small town? That's where things really ramped up, is when we allowed them. And as they start talking more like working family, like unions, America first, which in my mind means America manufacturing, not foreign wars. And to most folks, it does. Democrats, they take away Roe v. Wade, which is horrible for women. And one of the most life altering things, when a woman's health and her reproductive system, what's the government, anybody got to do with that? That should be a woman's thing only. So we use that because it fucking pissed women off. But then we overused it and didn't talk about nothing else. So you got that for 8 years. So all of this stuff just built. So there wasn't a silver bullet, but I think it really started in the Obama years.
I completely agree. I think Bill Clinton had an incredible ability to connect with regular folks. I mean, you could drop him anywhere. He could talk to people in, the Aspen Institute, and he could talk to people at the bodega down the street, and he talked to everybody equally, and he was good at it. Obama, I think, created this whole, it became kind of this gatekeeping thing where the guys around Obama were, first of all guys. And secondly, it became this kind of like, you're either with this cool crowd or you're not with this cool crowd. Either you could roll with us or you can't roll with us. And I think you see that with the Pod Save America guys. It can kind of continues, right? Where you have this constant, like, we're in on the joke and the rest of you are not problem. And I think that's a huge gatekeeping problem. I mean, look, I say this as somebody, I've got my graduate degree, which, by the way, has served me zero my whole life. But I mean, like, you just because you're
You
overly
did what you were
educated.
supposed to do. Like, you
Yeah,
were
I
supposed
did
to do
exactly.
these things, right?
I was a good girl. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. And the reality is that I never talk about it. And I think this is the first time I've mentioned it probably ever. And this has at least on Substack. And the reason for that is because it's completely fucking useless. And yet you can't go around talking about how smart you are and how you know better than everybody else because you're either more hyper-educated or because you live in New York City or because you're an elite or because you're a consultant and everybody else doesn't get it because you don't have access to the same kind of data that I do. And the truth of the matter is that I think under Obama, that kind of mentality took flight. And it's not something that most people can relate to. And it really manifested itself when Biden decided to forgive student loan debt because it never occurred to them to say the following. First of all, most Americans did not go to college, so they don't have student loan debt, but most Americans have other debt. They either have mortgage debt or they have car debt or they have, whatever other debt, the credit card debt. And nobody was letting that go for them. But these elites, they were going to get their college debt discharged. And that's exactly the kind of shit that I think really offends normal rank and file people, including a lot of people who did pay off their college debt and were like, what the hell? We paid ours off. Why is everybody else not paying it off? I think the intentions were good. I completely understand why they did it. But the messaging was so effed up.
It really
Precisely
was.
because of what I just said. You're leaving an entire chunk of people behind who just cannot relate to you.
I could not agree more. And, as we get towards the end of this thing, I wanted to say that's exactly why when folks wanted me to be on Substack, I came kicking and screaming because I'm not, anyway, I've really enjoyed it now. It's one of those things that old men don't like change, but once they do it, they're like, oh, look, I can look up baseball scores on my phone. It's cool. But I created the Rocha Revolution because I wanted to create a space to have a conversation. folks have said Chuck Rocha wears a cowboy hat, talks like this. He's creating the Joe Rogan of the left. We've been waiting on yada yada. I'm not trying to be Joe Rogan. I'm not trying to be Theo Bond. I just happen to be a lot like them. I grew up in a trailer house like Theo Bond. You know, I'm an avid sports, fishing, hunt. I'm a guy's guy, but I need other guys and other folks and other women. Anybody who are looking for refuge, you may be a woman and you didn't go to college and grew up in a trailer house like I did in East Texas. Like, I need them to know that it's okay to be a Democrat and let me explain why, but also talk a lot about other things that are not political, like these public lands that are very political, but it's hunting and fishing lands. It's talking about interviews with folks around sports and around all kinds of conversations that I just want to have a space for folks to be like, oh, Chuck's real. This is real. Oh, and he happens to be a Democrat because he believes in Social Security. He believes in working middle class folks. He believes that rich folks shouldn't have all the privileges that regular folks, again, think people would say that's a lot like Donald Trump, but that's also where the Democratic Party started. And I want to try to bring us back there. My Substack is only about 3 or 4 weeks old. We've got 1,000 subscribers. Like, it's people are really enjoying what we're saying.
Sign
And
up.
please sign up to do that. And we're going to have a conversation every week about something. Like when I saw that Julie was on the Substack and me and her had talked in the green room and she had texted me when I was considering running for the DNC and signed me up, I knew that I wanted her people to know who I was. And I wanted my people to know who she is, because you don't have to be a brown redneck. You can be in DC or you can be in New York City and you can have a master's degree, but we're all Democrats because we care about people and we care about regular folks. And so I think the more conversations me and Julie type folks are having, where you wouldn't sit around and go like, oh, I bet Chuck and Julie should get together and have it. We're the opposites in every fucking way you can imagine. But we have a common shared set of goals that we want for people in our party. We're frustrated and we can bitch a lot, but we also want to be a part of help fixing it and trying to get back to what brings us together instead of what tears us apart. And that's why I'm doing this. And I really do appreciate you having me on, Julie.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did. Guys, check out It's the Rocha Revolution. When do you broadcast, Chuck? What's the date?
Normally every Wednesday at 3 o'clock.
Okay.
And I'm doing 1 or 2 on each side, but that's the big show. This week we're having Adrian Carrasquillo, who's been doing a lot of in-depth reporting on the ICE raids
Yep.
and talking about U.S. citizens that have been getting arrested and stuff through ICE. So we're going to do a lot of that with Adrian, who's been kind of at the forefront of this immigration reporting.
Awesome. I love it. And I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so glad that you're getting your message out. And if there is an opportunity to run for chair of the DNC,
oh, here we go again.
should it not work out for the current chairman, I want you to consider it again, because I do really, and I mean that. It's not just because you're sitting here. I said this to you when you were considering it the first time. We don't have voices like yours amplified enough in this party, and we just don't. And we used to. That's what I said during the Clinton years. Bill Clinton himself, right, was a redneck from Arkansas. I don't care how many graduate degrees he had and Rhodes scholarships he had. But we don't anymore. And we need to expand that tent desperately. And we need to expand it by having people at the top who are actually doing the work, not just a token, like I'm going to give a Black woman this title, and I'm going to give a Latino this title and whatever else. But we really need to have people who are making decisions at that level. And everybody watch The Road to Revolution at 3
Thank
o'clock
y'all.
on Wednesdays in Chuck's Substack. And thanks so much for being here, Chuck. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Y'all have a great week.
All right. Bye.